I'm hoping you'll be interested in some of my design process. So when I see a yarn that I absolutely fall in love with, almost immediately something comes to mind that I want to make. And so when I was at at Fiber Spirit in Barrie this year, um, I came across this Aran weight yarn at the Loving Path Yarns booth. And I was talking to the hand dyer, and she said that nobody was interested in this Aran weight yarn, and I couldn't figure out why. And I absolutely love Aran weight yarn because I love cables. I absolutely love cables. And cables are most beautiful in Aran weight yarn with a slightly smaller needle. And when I saw this yarn, I thought, oh, I'd love to design a beautiful cabled sweater, because I thought that if there was a nice sample in the booth, that maybe people would be inspired and they'd want to buy this yarn. There's always a mixture with me of um, wanting to do the design, but also wanting to help hand dyers, because if you're a hand dyer, you don't have time to design. Maybe you don't even want to design. But one of the things I've learned about yarn is that if you want it to sell, you need samples, because there's few people like me who go in and look at the yarn and their imagination goes wild and they know what they want to do and they want to design. But most people go in and they see a yarn that they really love and they think, what can I do with it? They cannot take that next step. And so often when I'm working in a yarn store at a show, what I'm ending up doing is saying, oh, you love that yarn. Let me just tell you, you could do this, 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 and this with it, right? So, but when I look at yarn as I think, innate designer and creator, I look at the yarn and I feel a project immediately. Like some people would say that you get a piece of wood and you carve it until something appears in it, or a piece of stone. I feel a lot of that. Like I'm carving yarn with I'm carving with yarn. That's what I'm doing when I'm designing. And or sculpture. It's kind of like sculpture. It's soft sculpture. So get back to my story. Long story long. Um, I saw this yarn. I fell in love with it. She agreed to sell me some yarn at wholesale prices so I could play around with the design. I'm glad I did that, because this Fiber Spirit was in August. I got the yarn probably September, and in the midst of a move and a big change in life and other projects that were more exciting, I got sidetracked and I kept meaning to get back to it. One of the things with designing is I need to be into a space because once I get in the zone, I can lose days and sometimes weeks in a design. So, well, definitely months in some designs, but definitely I can lose a whole day just um, playing with the yarn before I even start, or looking for inspiration, or looking for a certain technique that I want to add to it. So I can lose a whole day not even thinking hard about it. So when I decide I'm going to design something, I need to know that I'm going to have days and weeks to invest in it. Once I'm started, I don't want to stop and start, because I lose track of where I was. Even if I make meticulous notes, if I put something down for 2 months and come back to it, I've lost the spark. So this one waited a long time until I was moved into my new place, settled, and I had time to play with yarn. And so it's now April, almost. It's the end of March. Tomorrow, I think, is April 1st. Yes, tomorrow's April 1st. So it's April. And last week, I finally got the time and energy to put into how am I going to design this sweater. We both had a vision of having a collar that had cables on it. But the problem with running a collar that I immediately ran into is cables tend to run this way and not this way. So either I design the sweater from side to side, or I knit the collar first and add it on. And it's one of these things that with design that people don't know if you don't do it. It's one thing to think it. It's another thing to take what you have thought, what you want to create, and physically manipulate it into the world. It's another thing altogether to put it in a pattern that then expresses what you did to somebody else so they can repeat it. So my first step is to figure out how I'm going to do this collar. I have a feeling for the cable. I very much wanted a very Celtic cable. So like Celtic knotwork. Um, and I definitely wanted it to run on the collar and then somehow carry down the sleeve on either side. I wasn't sure if I was going to add another cable. I'm still not sure if I'm going to add another cable within the context of the sweater. One of the things when I design is I like one piece of focus. I like one thing to be wow, and then the rest of the sweater to be calm. And it can be the color or it can be design. So I wanted this cable to really stand out at the neckline and down the sleeve for some continuity. And I'm not sure yet whether I'm going to repeat the cable within the body of the sweater on the back or the front or both. I don't want to make something that's, excuse me, I got a hair in my mouth. I don't want something that's going to scare someone away from doing this pattern. And sometimes people look at those Celtic sweaters, the Aran cabled sweaters, and they love them, but they're overwhelmed by them. So I wanted to create something very simple, beautiful looking, but a very simple cable that someone who is just starting at cables or not sure about cables was comfortable jumping into, but that was dramatic enough that when people walk by the Loving Path booth, they go, ooh, that looks nice, right? So all these things are mixtured into my mind, and my first step is to play with the yarn. So I get the yarn, I get some needles. This has been pulled apart now. This is the yarn I'm working with. It's the Loving Path Aran weight. And I don't think you can see the color here because, well, my camera's not great on but it is a very subtle gray, like just a very hint of gray. And I wanted something really subtle color-wise because if I didn't have something subtle, the beautiful cable would be lost. And you want the color, the cable to be focused on your sweater. So I started playing with this. You can see it's sort of fallen. Different size needles, got the yarn. I've sort of pulled this off already because I pulled this back maybe 8 times, playing with what what stitch do I want to use? What size needle do I want to use to get the kind of fabric that I want. With cables, I like things to be a little bit tighter so that the cable really pops. If it's too loose, then you lose a lot of the cable or you start getting holes in the cable. So I really wanted this to be on the tighter side so that the cable would pop. So I was playing with that. And that's how I sort of started the whole process. It's like getting to know the yarn. It's like getting to know a person. You know, you need to spend time with it. You need to play with it. You need to understand it. So that's what I started with. And then I jumped into my cable books. Here I am jumping off camera. I have some favorite cable books that I go to. I probably have 8 books that I like to use on a regular basis when I'm looking at what cable I want to have in my work. This is one of my favorites. It's the Interweave Knits, Cables, and Arans. The other one that I really love, and I think this might be my top favorite book right now, is the Nora Gone Knitted Cable Source Book. Wow, it's just so, I don't know if I could put this in front of my face. Look at that cable, so beautiful. And so nice to see the combinations that she chooses. For just my plain old, again, this one's a really good plain old, it's the Vogue Knitting Stittionary 2, which has got just cables in it, which I love. The one that I really want to love but can't seem to figure out is the Japanese Knitting Stitch Bible. Now, maybe I should read it cover to cover and figure out everything in there and how to manipulate it, but I end up having to print out stuff and rewrite the whole cable pattern so that it makes sense to my brain. And unfortunately, that's just a lot of work. So even though I use this as inspiration a lot and I look at it a lot, I practically can't use the cables in this book. However, as an inspiration and as a guide to certain beautiful cables, I think it's amazing to look at, just not practical for me. So anyway, I still look at it. I still looked at it for this one and tried to decide whether I was going to use one of their cables. And I really did actually fall in love with one of the cables and tried writing it out for this. And no, it was just too much work. to have a cable that was nice, but not, it would have been beautiful and maybe for another project, but it wasn't what I was looking for anyway. So although I spent almost half a day trying to rewrite this cable, I ended up I just decided to drop it altogether. So then I wanted to try and figure out if I could, because I'm Canadian and I want to add that Canadian element to it, I thought, well, maybe if I can create a cabled maple leaf that I could just put in on the sleeve, on the arm or something. The biggest problem is to create that kind of shape for the cables to run and to create that beautiful shape with the size yarn I've got. I could probably do it with a fingering weight yarn, but an Aran weight is so very wide. So I was looking at a 36, I think 30 stitch cable width and that would just, I've got big arms, it'd be fine, but anybody with small arms, that cable, that maple leaf is just going to get lost. So there's another day where I designed the whole cable. I was really fascinated with trying to design the whole cable. So it wasn't a wasted day, it was a fascinating day. And I'll probably use that cable at some point in a fingering weight project of some sort. But it was way too big for the Aran weight. So then I came across, so I was trying to figure out if I could do this in a way that could shape it in kind of an oval shape instead of, I would consider doing cables like in a square shape or doing the cables one length, one side and then one side and then sewing it together over the shoulders. But then I've got this situation of the cables kind of going flat here. Do I decrease over here and create another cable that runs out of it? The logistics of this thing. If I just said, oh, I'll just do a beautiful cable up the front, I probably would have had this done no problem. And I could have changed my mind on that one. It was just something we talked about briefly in a booth, and I could definitely have said, because the other thing I considered was actually running a cable, double knit cable up over the back and having a beautiful stand-up cabled collar, which again, I may do at some point. But I really did want to figure this one out. I'm like a pit bull when I get something like an idea in my teeth. I have to figure it out. No matter how much I struggle with it, I have to just go for it. So that's what I did. I went in and figured out, like I started to say, well, how can I do this? So I was looking at, I don't know how I ended up, Ravelry, of course, looking at different patterns, trying to get some inspiration as to how to figure out how to do this corner, this just over the shoulder. Because I had come to doing a saddle sleeve or something like that. And I was just really struggling. So one of the things I'm very conscious of is being inspired by someone's design, but not ripping it off. So there are so many sweaters out there. I guarantee you I'll design something, and this is uniquely mine. I haven't looked at somebody else's sweater and said, oh, that looks good, I'm going to copy that. But I'm using cables that everybody else has access to, right? And I'm not at the stage I can design my own cables. Obviously, I designed a maple leaf, but I don't know that I, really comfortable with designing a cable for beginning to end on this one, right? So the cable is going to be from one of these cable books, probably. Other people have used these cables. They'll probably use them in a sweater that's going to be an Aran weight sweater, so and it's just the way that you combine things. So when I'm looking for inspiration and it's for a sweater, I often look, or for, a hat, I often look at something that's not a sweater because I don't want to be informed. Like if I'm looking for a sweater, I'm not going to look at a sweater. If I'm looking for a hat, I'm not going to look at a hat, because what happens is I get that in my mind and then I feel like I'm working off of somebody else's process, right? So what I did was look at cables in pillows, because I thought, well, maybe there's something there, a nice cable. I just wanted to find a cable that really spoke to me Celtic wise. So that's really a lot of pretzels and crisscrossing, right? So that's the cable knotwork, the Celtic knotwork that I wanted to get. And I found this pillow, and the pillow has mitered corners on it. And I've forgotten the name of it. I'll put it down there, and I'll put up I'll show you a picture of the pillow and have a link to the pattern down below. But I bought this pattern so I could figure out how to do a mitered corner on my cables. And the coolest thing is that if I do a mitered corner, the cable doesn't get lost. It continues along. So I don't have a line where, because I considered doing decreases or increases and then sewing those together. Then you get a line in your work, or you have to figure out some way of hiding the line. This way, if I do a mitered square on either shoulder, then I'll be able to create that oval shape that I want by having two triangular shapes down here. And it can all be done in one piece. Now I'll have to figure out the logistics of how do I incorporate this into the sleeve, and how do I incorporate the rest of that into the body of the sweater. So am I picking up stitches? Am I doing this? Like, I'll have to knit the collar first and then figure out how I'm doing the rest of the sweater. And that's still an unknown. But this is my process. So I'm going to share with you as I go along my process of designing this sweater. Of course, I will keep some secrets because hopefully I can sell this pattern. But you know what? Honestly, I think I could reveal it to you, and people like you knitters and crocheters, I'm a crocheter too, are just the best people. Honestly, you're so supportive. And so I know if I showed you even every step of the sweater, people who like the sweater and want to make the pattern will buy it anyway. So I'm not going to hold back. I just decided that right now. I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to show you as much of my process as I can. And so you can get a sense of what I do when I'm designing. I don't know what else to say. There's nothing else to say. I'll keep you up to date. I just set up my whole filming studio. So hopefully I'll have a camera that can show you some of the knitting as I'm going along. But I will definitely keep you guys involved, and hopefully I'll be able to, now that I've got this little studio set up, keep a regular, because into the Yarniverse, I kind of showed a few things and not so much. So hopefully I'll be able to keep a regular visit with you guys, and I'll be able to be more consistent with showing off what I'm doing in all the aspects of the Yarniverse that I enjoy. Please leave a comment if you want to. I'm not going to say the like and subscribe. I love it, but honestly, I'm so sick of people with the like and the All right. I hope I get to see you guys again. I hope you come and visit me again. And I hope that you actually enjoy what I'm creating. Bye, everyone.